Hello everyone and welcome to the garage on Ride by PH. So when we think of the entry-level subcompact crossover segment, three things usually come to mind: affordability, practicality, and efficiency. So let's see if Mitsubishi cracked the code with the Mitsubishi XForce. So this is the 2025 Mitsubishi XForce, and let's see, does it have the X factor we're looking for? We're gonna find out today. But before everything else, let's start out with the first impressions. How does this thing look? So kita natin sa styling, maganda siya. Angular, macho, wide stance, looks like it's fast, looks like it's performance-oriented. But later on, we're gonna find out that that's not exactly the case. That being said, this car has quite a few things going for it, and we're gonna explore that in a bit more detail. So now let's take a look at the setup of the Mitsubishi XForce. So kita natin mataas ang kanyang ground clearance, typical of a crossover. This has more than 200 millimeters of ground clearance, so kita natin it can pretty much go over mixed terrain. Hindi siya off-roader, remember, pero capable of handling Manila's pothole-laden streets and the occasional drive here on like the gravel roads we're on today. So it's worth mentioning that the rear shocks of this XForce come from the Montero Sport. So it's built to handle some serious stuff. So looking here at the sides, you get body cladding here. You get 18-inch wheels, two-tone mags with 225 tires. So that gives it a very cushy ride, hand-cooked tires, hand-cooked Ventus. And over here at the back, the angular styling continues with LED taillights and more cladding here at the bottom. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that this car has a few things going for it and a few things not so much. Unfortunately for us, the engine is one of those things that, could have used a little bit of improvement because underneath the hood, we have a 1.5-liter naturally aspirated inline-4 engine codenamed 4A91. So this engine produces just north of 100 horsepower, 104 horsepower lang, and 140 Newton meters of torque. So that those numbers aren't much to begin with. But then when you take note that power is sent to the front wheels only via a CVT, well, that just makes for a sluggish drive. Nevertheless, if we take a look at the engine bay, kita natin maluwag siya. So sa mga mahilig mag-DIY dyan, let's say you're out of warranty or you don't care about the warranty, it'll be easy to change the oil. I can see the oil filler cap right here. The dipstick is right there. The coolant is right here. Everything is nice and accessible. The battery is here. And there's a lot of space for you to stick your hands in if you want to clean the engine yourself. So I think that's a plus, no? If you want to maintain your car like a lot of Mitsubishi owners do, looks like it's very easy to work on the engine. Okay, let's move on to the inside of the car. That's actually what matters most with crossovers like this. Okay, so let's enter the cabin of the Mitsubishi XForce because that's, as I said, the most important part of this crossover. So let's start the engine. You get a traditional push start stop button here. Foot on the brake, and it fires right up. Okay, so it's making, okay, there we go. So you get this nice and sometimes very annoying opening animation. You can see the interior is a fairly driver-focused cabin. You get the steering wheel, which kind of reminds me of the steering wheel of the Mitsubishi Triton. No? What else? So you get this multiple tone interior. You get black, soft touch plastic here. You get a fabric part here, beige trims down here, and then back to the black accents at the bottom. So as you'll notice, this entire bezel here looks like one big screen, no? But really, the only screen here is this part over here. So we'll talk about the display in a bit. There's a lot going on. But everything inside is completely digital. Your speedometer, your tachometer, your fuel gauge, and your temp gauge are all here in this center console, a center display over here. Yep. And then you can move on to the infotainment display, which has everything from your Bluetooth audio, your Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, and your volume controls and all the other features associated with the vehicle. Now, moving on to climate control, Mitsubishi, thankfully, it keeps the tactile AC controls here in the bottom. You get dual zone aircon. So, ibig sabihin ng dual zone, pwede mong ibahin yung temperature ng kaliwa at kanan. So, if your passenger wants a more nalalamigan siya or nainitan, they can adjust the aircon to their liking. Another very important thing to note here is, and probably a big chunk up where a lot of your money goes to, is actually the sound system. So as I mentioned, there's a big infotainment display here with Apple CarPlay, and you'll notice that the speakers are actually made by Yamaha. Yes, that's right. Yamaha. Gumagawa ng motor, gumagawa ng speakers, gumagawa ng piano. Pero ito Yamaha speakers. So this car, I believe, has 8 speakers. And you won't be able to hear it through the mic, but the sound quality is pretty good. So that being said, let's take a look at the back where your passengers are going to spend a lot of their time. Okay, moving on to the back of the Mitsubishi XForce. Wow! Pleasantly surprising, medyo maluwag siya. So this is my driving position. I'm actually 5'7", 5'8" on a good day. Not sure if today is one of those days, but yeah. So you can see lots of space here. I can even put a bag in front of my legs. A lot of headroom. I like that I get aircon vents too here. 2 aircon vents. I get a USB-A and a USB-C charging port. Do I get a fold-down thing here? Yes, I do. I get fold-down armrests with cup holders. Very nice. And if you happen to be driving with a full cabin and someone is sitting in the middle, there's still a lot of leg room, and you can position these vents to cool your nether regions very effectively. And there's a lot of headroom too. So yeah, no complaints on the back seats. Nice and very well appointed interior. Let's take a look at the back. Okay, so now here, moving on to the back, to the cargo bay of the Mitsubishi XForce. You're treated to a nice automatic tailgate and a lot of space here in the trunk. So I think even without folding the rear seats down, marami ka na pwedeng ilagay dito. You can put a bunch of coolers. You can probably fit a golf bag diagonally, but if you have a fancier, bigger golf bag, you're gonna wanna fold down the rear seats. Speaking of which, it's very easy to do that. It comes with some very handy pull tabs over here in a 60-40 split configuration. And I believe this tonneau cover just comes off like that, and should it be quick fold like that? There you go. Look at that. Easy. Nice touch from Mitsubishi there. And then this one just folds down. So as you can see, ang daming space na, although it's not flat per se, you'll still be able to fit a lot of stuff in there. I think you can fit a bicycle here. All you'll have to do is to remove the front wheel and a whole bunch of maletas if you're gonna use this car to shuttle you and your family to the airport for your out-of-town trips. Okay, so with all that out of the way, it's time to hit the road and see what the XForce is like to drive. Okay, so let's get on the road and drive the Mitsubishi XForce. So it's the typical Mitsubishi. You get pretty old school, dare I say old school driving amenities here. You get an automatic transmission, but the gear selector reminds you of something from 10 years ago, which might actually be a good thing, no? So napansin ko lang, may tendency if you're the type to push this and slide it all the way down, it tends to go all the way to L. So if you leave it on L, tataas yung revs, akala mo may palyado yung makina. Hindi naman, just put it back to D. So emergency parking brake, electronic parking brake rather. So let's drive this thing. Okay, so we are now behind the wheel of the Mitsubishi XForce. And, I must say that the handling is very good. The chassis is very well sorted. And that's also largely because of the suspension. No? So it's rocking a McPherson strut suspension setup at front and a standard torsion beam suspension at the rear. And so we're here in the streets of Magallanes, Cavite. A lot of hilly, a lot of uphill roads. And this is where you'll start to see the Mitsubishi XForce struggle. So as I mentioned earlier, it has a 1.5-liter engine with a CVT. It only makes around 100 horsepower, and ramdam na ramdam mo yung pagkakulang ng power when driving in the province, on twisty roads, and on the highway. So that's something I think is a missed opportunity for this car. Kasi ang ganda ng chassis, ang ganda ng handling. If you really push it through the corners, you feel planted siya. Pero it's just begging for a bit more horsepower. So hopefully Mitsubishi, if you're listening, can come out with the future iteration of this car. I don't know, maybe slap on a turbo, or maybe bring back the 4B11 we found in the Lancer EX before, the 2-liter inline-4 engine. Nevertheless, this car is not exactly built for performance, but rather for comfort. So this car, the seats are, leather wrapped, leather upholstered, very nice bolstering here on the upper and the lower back. And the driving position is commanding. It's very, you can see your visibility is good. And I think the cockpit is kind of driver-centric kasi kita natin ito yung display. Everything is within reach for the driver, making it easy to adjust everything on the fly. Okay, so let's talk about the infotainment, which is actually the star of the show when it comes to this interior. No? So kita mo, medyo maraming nangyayari sa screen. And it might be a bit like, whoa, what's going on? Ang dami. It might be intimidating and overwhelming. And it kind of is, sa totoo lang, no? So you have your sort of, it's like they're in buckets, no? So you have your Apple CarPlay, which is wireless, which I have not connected at the moment, but other features include this compass thingy here, over here. You can cycle through tilt angle, so parang siyang off-roader, no? Pwede ka kita mo yung tilt angle mo when you're climbing. So as you'll see in a moment, as we climb this, whoa, this hill over here. Yeah, no, 11 degrees yung gradient. Oh. Cool. Okay, so apart from that tilt angle, you also get your GPS, which is pretty crazy. Cool that a car like this has this. You'd think it's pang off-the-grid adventure 4x4, but no, it's really just a city slicker that's dressed as an adventure-ready vehicle. What else do we get here? We get here vehicle information, you get your ambient temp, your barometer, wow. You got a driving mode, which you can cycle through here. So yung driving modes niya, wala siyang sport mode. It just gets normal, wet, gravel, and interestingly, it gets a mud mode, which I don't know what it's gonna do since it's just a two-wheel drive vehicle. Nevertheless, if you want a bit more sporty, a bit more response, just press this button here on the side of the shifter, and it will say DS, which I believe S stands for sport, maybe, I think. And of course, like a typical Mitsubishi, you get some of that rally-bred technology. It gets active yaw control, or AYC, which supposedly helps stabilize things if you're really sending it through the corners, which we will see later on. Okay, now talking about the ride quality. So as I mentioned earlier, this thing has a high ground clearance, around 200 plus millimeters of ground clearance. Nevertheless, it doesn't really feel like it rolls a lot, which translates to a rather engaging drive on twisty roads. The brakes also are very responsive. You get four-wheel disc brakes with electronic brake force distribution and ABS as standard. That's the basic suite of safety features when it comes to brakes in cars nowadays, and the Mitsubishi XForce doesn't miss out on any of that. So as we're pushing the car now here through the twisty roads in Magallanes, you really see the chassis and the suspension tuning of Mitsubishi really shine through. It actually shines through the lack of power and performance that I mentioned earlier. So as you can see, we're dropping down here. Medyo maganda yung preno. Very linear ang braking. And then later, as we approach the twisties, you'll see that the car really maintains its composure, even if you're pushing a bit hard. Okay, so Mitsubishi has also thrown in a bunch of advanced driving assistance systems, or ADAS features, into the X-Force. So you get the basic stuff. You get adaptive cruise control. You get rear cross traffic alerts, you get blind spot monitoring, all the stuff that you need to really keep you alert and to keep you safe when tackling the city roads. But we're not in the city, we're here in the twisty roads, so let's try to see how much fun we can have with the Mitsubishi X-Force. So right now I'm foot to the floor, full throttle, and we're only going 75 kilometers per hour, 80 kilometers per hour. The engine winds up, revs up high, but it kind of loses its breath. It needs to catch its breath early on. And that can be a bit disappointing for road trips. And it's just me and Andy in the car right now. So we're around 180, 190 pounds each. Imagine pa kaya pagka fully loaded yung sasakyan with kids and people at the back and cargo and luggage. It's gonna be even more sluggish. Okay, so we're here in Magallanes. I'm foot to the floor, climbing up this hill. Hirap siya, but let's see how it handles. You can hear the engine screaming, revving up. We're only going 60 kilometers per hour, but the chassis is tight, the suspension is good. It really feels like the car could handle these corners at much higher speed. So that's a good thing when it comes to the handling and comfort department. Okay, so there you have it, guys. A quick first drive review of the 2025 Mitsubishi X-Force. So now it's time for us to give this car our reviews. Let's start off with performance, which is usually the most important thing to consider when shopping for a new car. So sad to say, no, there is a missed opportunity for Mitsubishi. It has such a nice chassis, good suspension, good handling, but it's just lacking in terms of performance. I really wish that Mitsubishi ponied up and gave this thing a bit more power. Maybe 150, 160 horsepower would have cut it perfectly. 104 horsepower is just too little for us to enjoy the potential of this car. And because of that, I'm gonna have to give it a 6 out of 10 in the performance side of things. Moving on to styling. So fortunately for Mitsubishi, I think personally that styling is something that they nailed with this car. I like the sporty look, I like the cladding, I like the lines, how it flows from front to back, and the sporty aesthetic that this car gives. So I'm gonna give it an 8.5 out of 10 when it comes to its styling. So moving on to utility, we talked about the interior, the leather seats, the spacious back, and a lot of cargo space, especially with the seats folded down. You can put golf bags, you can put bikes, you can put all sorts of stuff inside. So I'm gonna give it 8 out of 10 on the utility side of things. Now, value for money. How much are you gonna pay for a car like this? How much do you think this is worth? So the base model starts at 1.367M. This top-of-the-line GT variant with the ADAS and all the fancy stuff will set you back 1.581M, which is a bit steep considering what you're getting. So because of that, I'm gonna have to knock it off a few points, give it a 7 out of 10 for value for money. Overall, the Mitsubishi XForce, if you're gonna buy it, you really can't go wrong. It's a safe option because of the brand recall, the reputation, and the reliability that's associated with Mitsubishi. But that's not to say that there are other options in the market which will provide you much more value for your money and much more tech and performance. Because of that, I'm gonna give the XForce a 7.5 out of 10. So there you have it, guys. That was our quick first drive review of the XForce. Be sure to stay tuned to the garage for our full written review of this crossover. Thanks for watching.